Good morning, and welcome to your very first session at TC Europe. Yay! Wow, okay, that's a good start. Did you all like the keynote? Yes. Who's ready to try explain data when the beta comes out? I hope it's all of you. It is amazing. I've been playing with it already, and it's blown me away, so I hope you all get to try it. Now, who's heard James announce the Tableau Blueprint? All of you, right? So I hope you're really keen to hear all the details about it. Because let me tell you, I've been at Tableau for 6 years, first in consulting, now in product marketing. And I'm so excited to get to talk to you about Tableau Blueprint. And no offense to Elizabeth, my lovely colleague, but when a German says they're really excited, you better believe them.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and as Saskia just let you know, I am American, which means I do have to one-up her on the enthusiasm. So I'm going to say I'm super excited to talk about the Tableau Blueprint. But I am from the customer success team. I've worked in the US and now in London for about 4 years with Tableau. And again, like I said, I'm very excited to be here and talk to you guys about Tableau Blueprint.
Why are we here? Why do we even care about this topic at all? So if you've been at the keynote, if you read all the sessions that are in the app, okay, bit of feedback, right. Then I guess you're here because you want to learn how to become more data-driven. That's a great goal, isn't it? But why do we actually care? Why is this important? Because we want to prioritize facts over intuition. Again, sounds great, doesn't it? We should all be doing this, shouldn't we? But why do we care? Because ultimately, all of us want to find new opportunities, whatever that means for your organization. That could mean more efficient production. It could mean exploring new markets. It could mean providing better care to your patients and saving people's lives. But we also know it's hard. Again, James mentioned this in the keynote. A lot of us struggle. So many, in fact, that McKinsey found out in the study that only 8% said they were making a difference there, that they were breaking away. And if you think about that, 8% out of 1,000 organizations that they surveyed, that's not much. So why is this hard? Why do people struggle? Look at this. So imagine the scenario. You see this picture of these adorable baby Groot cupcakes, and you want to bake them. How hard can it be, right? Most cakes and cookies are based on flour, butter, sugar, and so on. But without the exact right ingredients and without the recipe, that's what you get. Does that look familiar? So we get asked these questions all the time. Of course, not about cupcakes, but about analytics. What does great look like? And of course, how do I get there? And as Tableau, we have the privilege to work with over 80,000 customers. And we know that all of you are unique. We know that all your situations are a little different, but there are themes that emerge again and again in the most successful deployments. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today. That's the Tableau Blueprint, in which we aggregate all these learnings into a series of step-by-step guides. And that's what I want you to take away from the session today. Think back to those cupcakes. I'll be talking about the ingredients that you need, and then Elizabeth, in the second half of the session, she will share with you the recipe you need to get there. Sound like a good plan? The Tableau Blueprint is based on 3 core capabilities that we see are at the center of a data-driven organization. Analytics proficiency in the user base, an agile deployment, a thriving user community, and of course, these capabilities have to be rooted in a flexible and defined governance framework. I want to go into each of these to just explain to you what's behind them and give you some examples as well of how we see successful customers using them. Agile deployment is so important because to support the really broad use of analytics, the IT teams need to realize that the data and the analytics environments are expanding and evolving over time. There's more users, there's more data, there's more content every day. And of course, the platform needs to be deployed and monitored and maintained to grow with those growing needs of the business. And remember, you're not just setting up the environment for today and then you're forgetting all about it. You are helping your organization embed data into how they operate. And of course, that needs to be established on a really secure and stable foundation. And I want to share an example from one of our customers, Daimler. So the first thing they do is they make it really easy for people to get access. You can simply get a Tableau license through their internal IT shop. And they also provide all their users with sandboxes that gives them a lot of room to learn and try new things. But most importantly, what they've done is that they delegated some of the daily admin tasks of the deployment that were all centrally managed before to the departments. And they, of course, set really clear expectations here and guidelines. But this allowed the central team to scale much more broadly than they were able to before because it freed up so much of their time to really focus on the health of the entire system. So they could make sure, of course, that the performance was right for everyone. And that's some of the pitfalls we see when we don't pay attention to this critical capability. If you don't pay attention to how Tableau is used and how it evolves over time, you're likely to run into constrained hardware resources. And of course, we all know what happens. We get slow performance. And if we get that, we get a really bad user experience. And some of you might know from experience, if that experience is bad, those people will not come back, right? So pay attention here. The second critical capability is relatively simple. At the end of the day, for an organization to be really successful with data, their users, of course, need to know how to use that data. Obvious, isn't it? Sometimes this is referred to as data literacy or analytics skills. Doesn't really matter what we call it. There has to be a baseline understanding in the user population of how to see and understand that data. And I know, and you know, that not everyone needs to be a data rock star, a ninja, a Jedi, a Zen master, whatever we call them. Not everyone needs to be an expert, but even people that are using data less often, so let's call them viewers in the Tableau language, they still need to know the fundamentals of reading and understanding data to really get value and insight from it. And we cannot ignore those people. We have to make plans for everyone. And again, I want to call out a customer that does this really well. This is Jaguar Land Rover. Now, they take best practice really seriously. They've actually come up with what they call top 10 commandments for analytics best practice, and they give those to their users. but they also thought really deeply about education. So they only have a small central team that serves a lot of people. So what they've done is they rolled out a power user program to over hundreds of people, and they trained all those people to at least intermediate and advanced level, so they can send them back to their groups to be the de facto experts to their colleagues. So they're the first point of call. They do a lot of training themselves as well, and they run the functional community forums there as well. So they're really an extension of that central team, and it helped them to really scale out their efforts to increase the proficiency much more broadly. If you don't think about this, you will see that people will fall back to more traditional ways of doing things, to how they've done things before. There's going to be a general just lack of understanding of how to properly apply data to their jobs. And if some of you are those people that pay for Tableau, that manage the licenses for Tableau, you will not get the full value of your license types if you don't think about getting everyone to that level where they can make a difference. The last core capability is user community. And we see this again and again with our customers who are really successful. They do this really well. An internal community drives adoption, it drives engagement, and it creates excitement for data. And we've all seen what a strong community can do. You're all here, right? You're all seeing it, you're feeling it. It really helps you to take that on internally, to help use of data grow, and more importantly, to gain traction. I think a lot of us have seen this before with projects where there was a lot of excitement to kick things off, and people were like, yeah, this is great, it's going to change everything, and then it can fizzle out. No one wants that, right? We want to create ongoing engagement. We want to create ongoing excitement. And that's what we need this internal user community for, where people can learn from each other and share knowledge. And again, I want to call out a customer that does this really, really well. This is Cargill. And they've actually adopted, I want to say, pretty much any program that we as Tableau run for our community to their internal community. So they only have a really small central team that not just manages the deployment, but also looks after the internal community. And they're running regular user groups where people exchange use cases and tips and tricks. And it's really important to them that that user group is cross-departmental. So they really have that knowledge transfer of people that usually wouldn't meet. And since their team is so small, the central team, using Yammer as their internal forum made a huge difference, because before, people would submit tickets to IT. I have a problem with this, can you help me with this calculation, and so on and so forth. But by using an internal forum, they drove those tickets down to 0. People were helping each other. So that was a great result for them. And my favorite story about them is that they also held a large Viz Games competition. If you haven't heard of that before, it's very similar, maybe on a slightly smaller scale, than our Iron Viz competition that's on tomorrow. And they actually had over 700 people participate. And they were all given Cargill business data. Now imagine the insights that were generated from 700 people analyzing this Cargill data. It's incredible. And their CEO was one of the judges of the competition. That's such an important message to send to everyone, how important it was for everyone to become more data-driven. If you don't think about how to build a strong community, that will come back to bite you later on, because you won't get any of these benefits of people sharing, people collaborating, people building their own support networks. There's going to be a lack of excitement, there's going to be a lack of awareness, and you risk that, you're introducing this great new thing, but it just sort of peters out after a while. You can only drive that sustained change if you get people engaged and if you get them feel responsible as well. So I mentioned in the beginning, underpinning all of these capabilities is a deliberate and ongoing conversation about governance. I say deliberate because some people treat it sort of as an afterthought, and I think we want to change that to bring that to the forefront of the conversation. Governance is a combination of controls, roles, and repeatable processes that then create trust and confidence in data. Now, a lot of people associate governance with traditional BI processes, and there's sometimes a misconception that it sounds a bit counterintuitive to self-service. But that's not how we see it. We see that governance takes a different but equally important role in a modern analytics environment. And we see that governance should enable and empower your people rather than restrict them. We really want to achieve a balance between empowerment and control. Now, James already mentioned this in a keynote a little, and I have an example for you here to sort of show you that tension between empowerment and control, and you can tell me whether you think this is a good analogy. All right, bikes. I already mentioned I'm German. I'm also half Dutch, so I'm going to talk about bikes. These are all examples of bike sharing schemes. These pictures are taken in Frankfurt, but you can literally see them in every city around the world. At first glance, it's a very user-friendly model. Go to my app, unlock the bike, I drive wherever I want to go, leave the bike, get on with my day. Sounds great, doesn't it? Very user-friendly. I feel very empowered. Now, I live in southeast London. If you're not familiar with London, it's not the nicest area. This is what I get. I actually have never managed to get one of these bikes to go to work with, because they're either in someone's hallway, they're chained to a fence, I can't get to them. So what we see here is a really user-friendly model that gives users a lot of freedom, but is open to a few bad actors that ruin it for everyone else. So contrast this with the classic. In Germany, these are Caller bikes. I think in Berlin they're sponsored by Lidl. In London, we have the Barclays or Santander bikes. Now, they're very similar, but you have some rules. There's some guidance around them. You have to return them to a station. You have to return them in a state so they're usable by others. And, of course, you can only ride them within the bounds of the city. So here we see a balance of empowerment and control. And a customer that has found that balance is Honeywell. And they've done a few very specific things that I want to share with you. First of all, they have a licensing process where users have to publish all their visualizations to Tableau server. That's the only way to share. There's no other way. So IT can see really closely who's using which data and how they're using it. Then they also have sandboxes and certified sites for each of the sub-organizations. So again, there's a lot of room for people to learn, to try new things without a lot of pressure and without a lot of risk. But when ready to share, they have to go through a certification process. And that certification needs to meet a few simple rules. It needs to meet the data and security policies. In some cases, it has to be SOX compliant. And of course, it has to be fit for purpose. I know this sounds like a really obvious thing, but I'm sure you can think of a lot of examples that were published to production that don't really meet that criteria, that they are fit for purpose. What they've also done that I really, really like is that in each department, they have their own data stewards who curate and publish the data for the rest of their teams. And that results not just in better governance, but also in hugely increased productivity, because people don't have to start from scratch with data that might not be optimal or that might not be quite the right one. So they really have that increased head start productivity to use those trusted data sources. And because users wanted to use Tableau, Honeywell could make sure that they keep those rules, right? That they stick to those guidelines that were set. So now that we've seen the principles, the critical capabilities you need to have in place to get there, but we've also seen just having the ingredients isn't enough. We also need a recipe for success. And Elizabeth will tell you all about what that looks like. So she and her team are really the experts at helping you to get where you want to go. So take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Saskia. So far, yes, we've heard some great examples about the why and the what of Tableau Blueprint. And so I'm guessing you're really anxious to hear about the how, so hear that recipe. And I definitely want to talk to you guys about this. Realizing the full value of your data means empowering everyone to make decisions with it. And as you map your journey to becoming a data-driven organization, I think it's really important to know that it's not just about deploying the right software. Instead, you're driving organizational transformation by prioritizing facts over intuition with data at the center of every conversation. So the path you take is not only going to give people the right tools, but also enable the development of new skills, new behaviors, encourage participation, and really recognize achievements so that you can ultimately alter how your organization uses data every day. So as we dive a bit deeper into this approach, I want to give you guys examples, so take a look at this. I think anyone that's in the audience that knows me right now is probably wondering how long it would take me to give a sports reference. The answer is about 35 seconds, but it's a really good one. So for me, I know this image up here can stir a lot of debate. You actually should have heard the debate. It started in my office when I first showed people this slide. But even if you're not a sports buff or really into sports, I do think that some of the people on the screen are probably familiar to you. And the reason for that is that the 4 people on the screen here are considered the greatest of all time. So not even just in their sport, but the greatest of all time in terms of athletes. So while that's arguable, that's debatable, one thing that I think everyone could agree on, though, is that they represent well-rounded athletes. These are people that didn't just develop one key area. Instead, they spent a lot of time practicing and developing skills in a lot of different areas in order to be a good athlete. So, speed, endurance, offense, and defense. If I was in the US right now, I'd make a joke about James Harden. But even if you don't see, exactly your favorite athlete up here, when we do look at other examples of consistency and excellence, you'll see that common factor. I know my audience, so hopefully people like Dirk here. You'll see that common factor of, again, being holistic and well-rounded. So just like with these elite athletes, this isn't something that happened overnight. This was a lot of development. This was a lot of practice. It was a lot of looking into what do you excel at, what do you need to work on, and really putting a lot of effort into that practice. So just like with your organization, it's not an easy task to transform your company. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Again, it's going to have to be deliberate and holistic, and that's why we're really outlining here, as you saw Saskia do, some core capabilities to build towards. And we want to really help you with the Tableau Blueprint, map out your journey so that you can do this in a holistic and well-rounded way. Cool. And so this brings us to the main part of this Tableau Blueprint. You're going to see this screen a lot. I'll give people some time to take pictures. But you can really think of it as a comprehensive guide that you can follow to build those core capabilities within your organization. So you can see here, it kind of looks like a tube stops. In a way, that's a good way to think of it. But each stop is building to those core capabilities that you just heard Saskia outline. And each stop defines a set of activities and best practices to follow. I think something that this map also does very well is it gives you an idea of the full picture. You can kind of zoom out and see that full picture beyond just the value of single use cases. But you can also zoom in to a specific stop and look at those areas as well. So we're going to take a closer look at this. We're going to dive in a bit, and I want to talk to you more about some of the process. Again, this is just the map, the bigger picture, so let's dive in a bit deeper now. Cool. So how you work through the blueprint depends very much on where you are in your journey. Where are your biggest gaps? Where are some of your problem areas? Where are areas that you need to focus? What we do typically see is that there are 4 distinct stages, which you see here. So discover, deploy, evolve, and then again at the top, governance is woven throughout all of those. So let's talk about those a little bit more. So the discovery process outlines a systematic approach to gathering information and perspectives from sponsors and stakeholders. This is talking about roles and responsibilities, enterprise architecture, and how you're going to use data and analytics among the different teams. So here you're really articulating what does success look like and what am I trying to achieve? And then once you know that, you're identifying the team of stakeholders who are going to get you there in that effort. At the end of this stage, there's a clearer vision, again, of what are we trying to accomplish and who's going to get us there. So discovery definitely is revisited as you expand to new users and use cases, but you're going to do that with a clear vision of your future state and the decisions you are going to make moving forward. Cool. So Saskia's done a really good job of outlining governance for us. So here I just wanted to reiterate that governance is a repeatable, ongoing process. It can be hard to define because it means different things in different contexts, but ultimately the goal is that it enables and not restricts. Governance is central to the Tableau Blueprint because it is governance that makes self-service possible. As the anchor point of the blueprint, governance will drive all of the decisions as the project teams develop agility, proficiency, and community across the organization. Cool. So at this point, we know what we're trying to build, we know who we have on our team, and so then we'll focus more on building exactly to those core capabilities. So during the initial deployment, there does need to be coordination between cross-functional teams to install and configure the Tableau software, which we'll see at the top. You also are going to educate users and provide organization-specific enablement resources. So after the initial deployment, you're going to be able to onboard new teams and use cases with education and communication. And then as you evolve, your analytics strategy needs to keep pace with the growth of users and use cases across the organization. So this is the stages you'll see here. Your users will adopt modern analytics, and you will adapt your operating system by delegating more responsibilities over time. So your teams have access to several resources, information, and data to tailor and tune your environment and to the changing business needs. So this process evolves into your project teams being responsive to the growing use in data and analytics among your organization. So you're going to look to set and establish a feedback loop to monitor and measure key metrics, including the value that your business achieves. Cool. So, walk through the stages, and now I know the question is, so where do I fit? So as I did mention before, the stages really illustrate key decision points and a proven repeatable 4-step process. It's just something we've seen as we've worked with many organizations. However, I know a lot of you in the audience right now aren't at the beginning of your journey. It's not going to move in that perfectly linear fashion, and that's quite all right. For existing deployments, use the blueprint to assess your current capabilities, including where you are excelling and where there's opportunity for improvement and growth. You can then think of the blueprint more as helping to define the clear end game, as well as giving you a path to get there. So to further illustrate this, I'm going to go back to the blueprint map, but this time I want to look at it through the lens of an existing deployment. As you guys heard me say before, I am part of the customer success team, and my role revolves a lot around talking to my clients about their deployment and really how they can get the most out of it. You know, you've made an investment in Tableau. How do we get you the most out of that investment? I want to walk you through an example of how I would directly apply the blueprint with one of my customers. For this example, I am going to call my client Saskia's Cupcakes, and I'm going to invite Saskia to come back up here. You're off the hook yet. Cool. Do you want to tell us a bit about your organization?
Yes, I'd love to. So thank you for having me here. We have been using Tableau for over 3 years, and we're now looking to expand the usage really across our organization. And as you can tell from our picture, we specialize in Marvel-themed baked goods. You might think that's a niche, but it's actually a huge, huge business opportunity. So I've spent some time with Elizabeth talking about where we fit and where our current way of running Tableau and running our deployment, how that fits with the Tableau Blueprint. And Elizabeth helped me assess where we're doing well and where there's some areas that we can maybe improve on a little bit. So this is what I got. And we can see that there's areas that I'm doing really well in. But we can also see there's areas that maybe I want to spend a bit of time on. So I should probably go back and look at our strategy. I should think a bit more deeply about education, and clearly I have a communication issue. So that's definitely something I need to address. So looking at this assessment, I clearly have a bit of work to do.
Cool. And as you guys may remember before, each part of the blueprint, so each tube stop on there has an associated list of best practices. You know, they're very clearly detailed actionable items. So when we were assessing Saskia, there is a lot of work for her to do. And I know that it would have been very easy for us to put a bunch of 100% on this, but that's not the reality for most people. The reality is you end up with something like this, which then translates into this. That's a lot of topics, right? That's a lot of best practices. It's a lot of activities. I know this slide says topics at a glance. That is a bit tongue-in-cheek. I don't think you can glance at this and gather a lot of information. But this is what all of the stops would look like in the detailed guides of the blueprint. That's a bit overwhelming too. So again, as the customer success manager, an important part of my job isn't just understanding my client and their deployment, but it's also helping her focus. It's also helping break down a lot of these concepts and making them a more doable and digestible list of to-dos. It's helping her know where to start. So for me, my next steps are that I want to break this down to help Saskia find a starting point or a good next step. So my advice here would be for her to consider, the assessment that we just did, but also the stages we talked about. It's going to make the most sense for us to go back to those earlier stages of discovery and deploy and start there, and then move down the map to strengthen towards the core capabilities. So by starting in discovery, we look to strengthen and more clearly define our analytics strategy as well as the key stakeholders in the effort. So there is some of that there, as you can tell from the percentages, but we want to go back and reevaluate and take a look at the blueprint and see where there's some areas that we could, go in and strengthen, where can we relook at how we are assigning teams, that kind of thing. From there, she will then look at growing and improving the foundations of educating users and establishing internal communications. So the map now becomes this. We're going to give her those 3 next steps to start at. And like I said, once we strengthen those areas, we can then make a plan to move down the rest of the map. So this is where we are in terms of next steps. And as soon as we build up those specific areas, again, we'll build a plan on this to continue working together. And so I've given Saskia these 3 focus areas, and then she's going to show you what her process is from there.
So when I get back to the office on Thursday, or maybe I take Thursday off and recover, so get to the office on Friday, I am not so daunted because I know exactly what to do. And the first thing I will do is go and look at all the resources that are available right now for everyone in our online help. So if you can't see the URL, that's just our online help blueprint. Now, you don't need to remember this. You will find it very easily, and we're also happy to tell you where it is. But I just wanted to highlight that I can just get started right away. And the first thing I will want to do is probably look at all the guides we have for analytics strategy, because that's what Elizabeth identified as an area that I should really work on. Now, of course, you've all seen that big fat 0 that I got for communications. And you can also see that there is a lot of depth here. So there's a ton of different guides that I can drill into and really pick the ones that are relevant for me. So I also want to look at communications. And there's a lot of things that we sort of planned to do for a long time, but just never really got started on because we didn't know how to. So for example, we always knew we needed a better way to communicate best practice. We always knew we should set up something like an intranet, but we just didn't know how to get started. And all those resources are now available for you in the blueprint guides in our online help. Oh, is that working? Almost. Don't let me down.
It's getting
there. Okay, this is fun. All right. Yes, okay, cool.
The next part's really exciting, so we're getting to it. Cool. Well, yeah, so like we said, we wanted to break it down. Saskia is able to go to the Blueprint Help Online, and what that becomes then in that list of topics is this and this. She has a shorter list that she can focus and work through before we move on to other steps. I know that a lot of the time with looking at your deployment, there's a lot of things that need to be done. And so again, what we really want to impart with you is that you do have all of these resources with the blueprint, but there is that ability to hone in and focus on some of these first steps, some of these earlier stages before you move further. Cool. Let me go back one. So I think right now what you're probably wanting to do is get your hands on Blueprint. I know a lot of people take pictures. But what I bet you're also thinking too is, how do I get an assessment like Saskia did? I know I can sit there and read it and map it out in my head. Maybe I don't quite know how to do the percentages the way she did. But the good news for you guys is that we have that available here at conference. So this QR code actually works. If you don't have your phone with you, don't worry. But what this will do is let you take an assessment that will understand, it will ask you questions about your role, it will ask you about your current deployment, and ask you about the different core capabilities, and really show you where you measure up and give you those percentages as you saw on screen. And then what will come from that is that we will actually send you an email like the one you see on screen.
The one you don't see on screen? Okay.
Those are my notes, but
sorry guys, my Mac's letting me down.
No, it's fine. But what you'll do when she gets this up on screen is, so not only are you able to take that assessment and get a good visualization of where you're scaling to Tableau Blueprint, you're also going to get an email that will show you some recommended sessions based on your responses. It will link you directly to the sections of the blueprint that apply. And it will also give you some next steps that you can actually come to the Data Village and visit the Customer Solutions booth and get a consultation with one of our customer success managers based on your results.
For those of you who've been at Tableau Conference Europe last year, you know that I have a really bad relationship with conference internet. So I was going to show you an email that I got from my assessment, but it hasn't loaded. So there we go, continuing the winning streak. But please take the assessment. It's super valuable, especially because it gives you recommended sessions as well that are really fit to your needs. So let me just swap this out.
Cool.
So you actually look at the right screen.
Cool, and yeah,
There we go.
You can actually take it based off of that, but it does live in the app as well. If you go into the customer solutions part, you'll see it there. But again, you can go to the table, and we have some iPads and a laptop available for you to take the assessment. I know that in talking about this, we gave you a very quick example. But I know that for people in the audience, this is a very big and strategic initiative. It's not, it is big. We know that. We know that some of these topics, some of the work that you have to do can become overwhelming. But we also want you to know that we're here to help. And now let me show you this. I know that for a lot of you, you might need some help to accomplish all of this. And we at Tableau, one thing that I would like to impart on you is that we have completely realigned the way that we support you to Tableau Blueprint. I know I've given some examples from my team. You can really think of us as helping to orchestrate resources, and we also do some really cool things like build and administer the assessment. But we've got some other really great things too. We have our services and partners. They can partner with you as a team and be resources for things like governance and monitoring. We also have our training and our education options, so both free and paid, but really to help you set up your own enablement options in your organization. We also have things like certifications, and I know people are very familiar with some of the updates to e-learning, as we've seen that is so helpful for people across the organization as we've changed some of the offerings there. And then also premium support. They can really help ensure an optimal performance of your environment. So please, like I said, be aware we are here to help you, and we have some components to help you on this journey. Cool. Awesome. So, want to get started? Like I said, you can actually, everything that I've talked about here, in terms of the Blueprint Online help, is free and available today. You guys can all use that link to access it. You can also go to take the assessment, so you will find it in the activities section and tap on customer solutions, and you'll find a link to the assessment there. And like I said, please visit the booth in the Data Village, because you are able to not only get your results there, but you can get a consultation with one of the customer success managers, and we have some pretty cool Tableau swag as well for people who take our assessment. Cool. I did want to give some additional sessions that we wanted to recommend that are related to this one. One of them will actually be tomorrow, so building user community in the same room, and also self-service and governance, which will be today at 2:30 in Convention Hall 2. One thing that I think I might have mentioned, but just because we didn't get the visual, so I want to mention it again, is that you will get an email with some session recommendations after you take the assessment. So just be aware that is there too to help you, fully utilize and get benefit out of the sessions this week. Cool. Last thing, please, complete the session survey from my evaluations menu in the Tableau conference app. You'll find it there. Cool. And with that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for letting us walk you through Tableau Blueprint. We're happy to take any questions too.